Hello and welcome to How to Be a Money Magpie, the podcast from MoneyMagpie.com. I'm Jasmine Birtles, the founder of Money Magpie, and this podcast series looks at all sorts of aspects of money, from investing to cryptocurrencies, saving tips, and how to make money on the side. And today's programme is rather special because we're looking entirely at how millennials can save and invest money day to day. And we're doing it with someone who has lived it and is living it pretty successfully, I think. And that's our head writer, Annie Thorpe. Annie's a financial expert. In fact, she's in the process of qualifying as a financial advisor, but she is also a creative writer and is about to work on a feature film. She is a busy woman. So, Annie, welcome to the Money Magpie podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So, Annie, give us a potted history of your financial background, because you're a financially very savvy person, I know. But have you always been like that?
I always had a fair understanding of money. Unfortunately, though, I graduated right in the middle of the recession, or actually just as the recession hit. So I went through a series of redundancies when I was living in London. It's made redundant 6 times in about 4 years. So I never got the chance to get promoted and have pay rises and pay my rent. So I decided to go freelance after a while of always being made redundant. Unfortunately, around that same time, I was struck very ill and I had to give all my money that I'd taken from client deposits back. And that, combined with having bills to pay, meant I ended up racking up quite a lot of debt into the thousands. And unfortunately, it was a case of bad luck rather than frittering money away. But I swore to myself I would never, ever get into that position again. And I worked with Step Change to use a voluntary debt management program, and they took the stress out of debt for me and got me back on my feet. And now I'm investing and I'm not broke.
No, you are doing so well. You must have learned some really useful things in that time.
I think there are some things that are instilled in you when you have to choose between whether you put the heating on or whether you can eat that day. And this winter, I remember tweeting about it, that I'd left my radiator on all night, overnight. And I realized when I woke up in the morning and I had genuine panic and shook from anxiety. And then I remembered, hold on, I can pay that bill. And you still carry that with you even when you are financially secure again. It's something that you swear that you'll never get into that position again. So it does give you a lot more of a hustle kind of attitude. I hate that word hustle, but it does give you a determination to avoid ever being that broke again. And you learn all sorts of tips about living frugally and things like that. So that sticks with you, definitely.
Give me some of those ideas, because yes, I agree. You know, when you get through that sort of thing, you think, oh, I'm never going to do that. So what are some of the things that here's another awful word, hacks that you've come up with?
I am a big fan of discount codes. I use them all the time. I'm not ashamed of using 2-for-1 vouchers when I go out for dinners with friends. I also shop at cheaper supermarkets. I don't always go for the brand, but now I'm in a position where if I really want the branded thing, I can get the branded thing. It's things like, I live on my own, so there's no point in heating an entire flat, even though I work from home all day. It makes sense to me to heat the one room that I'm in, and that's it. And just wear an extra jumper and some more socks and a hot water bottle and maybe a blanket. And things like that, particularly because of the setup that I've got here. Unfortunately, I've got storage heaters, which are a very expensive form of heating, and there's nothing I can do about it. The same with the hot water. I only need the hot water tank to be filled with hot water if I want to do the washing up. So I do the washing up every few days rather than every day, because otherwise I'm heating this massive tank every day for 2 hours and it's costing me a lot of money. So just reducing my use wherever I can on things is generally the way to stay frugal.
Yeah, well, these are great tips, but you know, as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking, but you do have a life as well, don't you? Do you? You do.
Absolutely I do. And it's that thing of finding that balance. Of course, when you're trying to claw your way out of debt, you do have to sacrifice things like don't have that takeaway, or maybe not choose that coffee when you're out. But nowadays I can just be like, I will have that coffee, or Saturday I'll have a takeaway. I think when you get out of that hole of debt, it's important to retrain yourself to live within your means. So work out your budgets and work out what you can actually spend, what you want to spend on, what's important to you. For me, what's important is spending on yarn. I'm a big knitting and crochet person, so if I see a sale, I will stock up on my favorite yarn rather than buying it at full price, but I know I'm going to use it, that kind of thing. Although that also makes me sound like I have no social life, so maybe let's skip over that.
But I know you do have a social life, and you've got animals as well. You've got pets.
I do. You may even be able to hear her snoring next to me. I have a very big dog called Hendrix, and I have a Persian cat called Miguel, who is bound to make an appearance at some point while we're talking. And so they're quite expensive to run, and it's that thing of you have to balance what you want to spoil them with versus what you can afford. They get spoiled more than I get spoiled, that's for sure.
Of course. Oh, in all of this, you're also investing, aren't you?
Yes, and it's really only been in the last couple of years that I've been in a position where I can not only save enough through the year for my emergency savings net, which as a freelancer in particular is really important, but I can drip feed some of that into investing, and it's only small amounts. I'm not sending any lump sums into ISAs or stocks and shares or anything like that. You know, I drip feed, some months nothing, other months £10, other months when I'm flush maybe £50. It's not loads, but I've managed to do fairly well out of it, so we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, you have, haven't you? Because didn't you say you've set up a LISA? Tell me what a LISA is, and what you've actually put the money into, which investments.
Well, this is the thing. I have a Moneybox account, and so I have a lifetime ISA, but I also have a stocks and shares ISA. The lifetime ISA I'm using for my pension because I'm self-employed. I don't get pension contributions. So the lifetime ISA, you pay in up to £4,000 a year, and the government will top up 25% on what you've paid in that year. You can either use that amount saved for your first home deposit, kind of like the old Help to Buy ISAs, or you can leave your money in there until you're 60 and retrieve it once you're 60 as a pension or a lump sum retirement. So that's what I'm using that for. My stocks and shares ISA is a more immediate investment, but obviously it's got to be in there for 3 to 5 years to make the investment worth it. When I looked at how it was performing, I realized that these preset portfolios that I'd gone for, which were a medium risk appetite, I deliberately didn't want to lose loads of money on a high risk thing because I couldn't afford to. I played around with the settings a little bit, reflecting on what's been hit in the lockdown and what's been hit in the past year in terms of the global economy. Things like commercial property is struggling because, you know, all the offices are shut, landlords are not necessarily getting their rents. So I reduced the amount of shares that I had in commercial property, and I went for slightly more stable things such as bonds. And that meant at the moment, I checked this morning, and on the stocks and shares ISA, I'm on 14.1% in terms of returns.
Annual return of 14.1%. Wow, well done.
Compared to the average cash savings, which is about 0.01%.
Literally, yes, that is what it is. I mean, you know, you might as well talk to yourself, really.
I mean, that could go down. It could go right down to nothing. But that's the whole point of investing. You ride it out over the ups and downs, and in theory, it grows over time. And that's why I have 2 different types of investing accounts as well, because the lifetime ISA is a limited pay-in. There's only a certain amount I can pay in. The government bonus helps mitigate the risk, and I can't touch it till I'm 60 anyway. And then the stocks and shares one, I can play around a little bit more freely with that one and reflect on the more immediate changes in the economy to try and ride out some of the dips and troughs that are bound to come.
Absolutely. Which sounds great. And you're talking about, your LISA, which you won't touch until 60, but you could, as you say, you could take it out if you wanted to put a deposit down on a house. Is that something that you're aiming to do, buy your own place?
I'm quite a rare millennial in that I don't have any ambitions to buy my own house. I think it's a very important thing for most people to do. I'm just in a very, very lucky position where I rent from my family, and it makes more sense for me to do that than lock myself into a mortgage, especially as I'm self-employed and income can go up and down. So that works quite well. I do pay market rent, so it's not everyone's. Of course, she can invest. She doesn't. She lives for free. I do not live for free, but it is a beneficial position to be in, definitely.
Yeah, that is good. And let's be honest, it's home ownership is very much a British thing. As you know, if you go to Germany, even France, all sorts of parts of Europe, they're like, well, why would you buy? Why would you, as you say, why would you lock yourself into a mortgage? So it always interests me when people are quite happy to rent, because there are a lot of advantages to renting, and there are a lot of problems connected to mortgages, particularly 95% mortgages were around, because you've just been writing about that, haven't you?
I have. The 95% mortgage scheme is frankly terrifying for most people. I think the idea that you can borrow 95% of £300,000 on a fairly average salary, particularly when property prices are so high and we're anticipating a property bubble to burst, that could leave you with negative equity, and that leaves you in a very big financial hole, which, as millennials will know, we have all been in a big financial hole because we all graduated around the time everything went wrong the first time round. So I think there are some scary things. Home ownership is pushed in this country, I think, because we don't have things like rent control. So, if you can pay £350 on a mortgage and own a house compared to £1,000 plus for the same size property in rent each month, which is essentially paying off someone else's mortgage, I do understand why home ownership is such a big drive, but there is less flexibility and it's a massive commitment. So I think we are definitely pushed towards home ownership as some kind of aspirational dream.
Yeah, I agree. Yes, I remember visiting Vienna at one point and being shown around the centre, and they just pointed to what looked to me like a lovely apartment block, and I think it was like 2-bedroom flat in the middle of Vienna with something like €1,000 per month, and it rental, and you're just like, wow. And they said, well, we have rent controls. I thought, yeah, that's what we need. Honestly, I think we need them. Do you think? I mean, you were saying about Gen Z, well, no, particularly millennials having come out during the last, one of the last downturns. And do you think that millennials and Gen Zers, let's be honest, have had a really tough year over the last 12 months? Do you think they've had the toughest time?
I really do. I think a lot of the statistics coming out at the moment are also reflecting that younger people tend to be the ones who serve in industries such as hospitality and tourism, and obviously those have been entirely hit. There are also figures that show the people who tended to keep their jobs were the more experienced people, and that's quite an interesting business decision, and it's quite an understandable business position, because if you want to make someone redundant, it's a lot cheaper to make younger people redundant than older people who have a lot more service with the company. So that's a business decision. I also think this year has compounded a lot of the problems millennials have faced over the last decade, like home ownership, like rising rents. If I were to go and find a job at my current level in employment, I would still be receiving around about the same salary as when I graduated a very long time ago, 2008. I would be pretty much at the same salary point. Whereas I should be significantly higher, but because salaries are not going up with inflation, we are struggling because the cost of living is going up. So many more of us have gone to live back with mum and dad, which obviously puts pressure on them. And also a lot of people have moved home this last year. They are finding that they're saving a lot of money, but they've been faced with either losing their grandparents or parents in the pandemic, or they are finding that they're having to care for their parents generally, that our parents are getting to an age where they might need more care, and that's something that we're starting to think about. particularly with more of us living at home in the past year than probably ever before. I don't have a statistic for that, but I do know that a lot of millennials move back home.
Yeah. So do you think that it's true what a lot of millennials and Gen Zers say, that they'll never be able to afford to buy a house? They won't be able to retire, or at least retire at a decent age?
Definitely. I think 98% of millennials within my generation. So obviously millennial is a huge scope where, you know, that's a big term. I'm in the older end of millennials, and in the older end of millennials, because we're the ones who now have children and families and, you know, partners. I think a lot of us are relying on inheritance to bail us out when we're older. We don't have the luxury of saving for pensions. We don't have the luxury of saving very much money into our bank accounts, whether that's for a house deposit or an emergency fund or just to live. We are always very hand to mouth as a generation, and have been for the last 10 years or so.
So what would you say are the most important things for millennials and Gen Zers to do with their money day to day right now to cope? Well, to more than cope, actually, to cope and to be able to put money aside.
Well, first of all, I would say do not opt out of your workplace pension. That is free money for your retirement. That is just take it. It might feel like you're not getting as much each month in your pocket now, but your employer is legally obligated to match your contributions to a certain percent, and the government tops it up. So that's free money for your retirement. And if you put it away in your 20s and 30s, you can leave that pot to grow, and you've got 30 years for it to do its thing. So in theory, you should have a lot more money by the end of it than you actually pay in. So definitely, unless you really, really need that extra cash right now, don't opt out, or temporarily opt out if you're strapped for cash, and then opt back in. And like the first thing you should do is opt back in for your pension as soon as you can. I would say download our ebook that we've just written about how to save.
Good one.
Because you can save, even if it's £5 a week or £5 a month. That is a safety net that you are building, and it creates a habit that makes it much easier. There are simple things you can do, such as most banking apps will have a savings sweeping system where you can round up your pennies into a savings pot. So if you want to buy something and it's £4.80, it will round it up to £5 and put that 20 pence into a savings pot. And it's pennies, but over time, if you're not looking at that pot growing, over time, it really will deliver with just this cash pot that you didn't expect to have. Kind of like finding money down the back of the sofa.
Yeah.
You don't expect to have it, and then you realize that you've lost 10 quid down there. You know, it does add up.
It's all rather nice. And what about you? What are your plans for your future? Because you do all sorts of things, I know. Would you like to retire early, or have you got too many interesting things to do to think about that?
I honestly don't ever see myself retiring if I get to do the things that I want to do. As you well know, I'm a very creative person. I would love to break in with my screenwriting and TV and film industry. And as a storyteller, if I can tell stories for the rest of my life, I don't think I'll ever stop. But that's also not exactly a very high energy career. So I'm not going to wear myself out compared to perhaps other more intensive physical careers. I'd like to take some downtime, but I think I'll probably keep working until I'm well into my 80s.
And that's I think a really fun future, to be honest. You know, who said that work is so much more fun than fun, and I think when you are, as you say, as you're a creative person, like you are a writer telling stories, that sounds like a fun life to me. Thank you, Annie. That's all so helpful, and I think we've got a lot to take away from that. Whether you're a millennial, Gen Zer, or a little bit older, that's all great ideas. Thank you, and that's your lot from us today. Many thanks to Annie Thorpe from MoneyMagpie, head writer and feature film writer. Thank you, Annie, for showing it and telling us how millennials can succeed. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Our handle is, of course, MoneyMagpie. You can follow me too on Twitter at Jasmine, just Jasmine. But on Instagram, I'm Jasmine Birtles. So come and follow me there. If there's a particular subject you'd like us to cover on the podcasts, just let us know on the Money Magpie message boards or get in touch on social media, because we'd love to hear your ideas. Today's episode was presented by me, Jasmine Birtles, and the producer was Jenny Birtles.